My projection is that it will be a hot war. I think we have had this on the burner since 2014 when President Barack Obama authorized a coup that overthrew the elected government of Ukraine and installed a revolutionary junta. Afterwards, we began flooding them with very advanced weapons. We built up a very robust Ukrainian armed forces, and they commenced a war against the Russian-speaking areas on the border, principally the Donbass Republic. And there were 14,000 people who died before Russia ever got involved in the war. So Russia hated to get into this war, and they delayed and delayed and delayed, and they tried to work out arrangements with NATO where NATO would stop its interference right up to the border. But I think the decisions on war don't just come up spontaneously the way we think they do in the movies. They're usually geopolitical maneuvers that are planned sometimes decades in advance, but at least 10 years in advance. And I think this one was. And where it leads us now is we've seen this inevitable escalation where we debated, well, will we send, certain weapons there? And we've gone from missiles, and we've gone to HIMARS, guided rockets, and now we're up to tanks. It seems fairly clear to me we're going through this little two-step propaganda movement where we're saying, well, we really don't want to send the jets, but other people want to send the jets. Eventually, we're going to send the jets. Just last night, I ran across an article where Britain is going to provide advanced cruise missiles with a range of 180 miles so that these things can be put on the Russian border. We can actually attack deep into Russia itself. And, at a certain point, you say, okay, what's the next thing? The next thing is tactical nuclear weapons. There are 5,000 miles between us and Russia. There are 6,000 miles between us and China. The only possibility, the only threat that we face from overseas is a thermonuclear threat. It is a genuine threat because I know there are people in the Pentagon and elsewhere who think, well, if we launched a surprise attack, we could knock out all of their missiles and so forth. The problem is they now have hypersonic missiles that on a moment's notice can fly, and they can actually hit places in the United States, hit places in Europe. There is no defense because they fly at such a speed that there's nothing that can catch up with them. Also, we have Russian submarines with carrying, over 100 missiles, not missiles, but 100 warheads. And they can rain down destruction on New York, on San Francisco, on Washington, D.C., and of course, all of the capitals of Europe. They don't want to do this, but we're pushing them further and further. And what's happening now is you've got a lot of very smart people in the Pentagon, in the State Department, and in London, NATO, but they're acting like lemmings, where there's a feeling like, well, we can do this extraordinarily reckless thing, but, Joe and Sam and Kathy, they think it's okay, so I guess everything is fine. And meanwhile, we're charging across a cliff like the lemmings, everybody thinking, well, everybody else says it's okay, and the next thing you're over the cliff. We have never faced a threat of thermonuclear war that ever compared to this. And I'm including, I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis. I actually saw troops moving through the state of Florida to go and invade Cuba. So I know what it is. And I used to cover myself. When I was a little boy, we'd jump under the desks and we'd cover ourselves. What we're faced today, the American people are totally unaware of it. It is 100 times more dangerous than what we encountered back when I was a little boy. It's genuine. And we keep pushing the line further and further. I think there's a desire to weaken Russia. I think there are certain global interests. There are global oligarchs who look with tremendous interest at the enormous wealth of Russia. Russia has natural resources that are beyond our wildest dreams. Few people are aware of the enormous exports of natural resources. They're the number one exporter of lumber, of wheat, of fertilizer, of natural gas. They're huge exporters of oil, of aluminum. It just goes on, cobalt, manganese, all sorts of things. And there are people who say, look, if I could somehow get control or get a big interest in the oil or the gas or the lumber, I could be a trillionaire. And I think some of those people have an influence over the American government. The American people get nothing. We get absolutely nothing from this. We get the bills. We're the bill payers, but we get nothing out of it. It doesn't serve any legitimate national interest of the United States to be involved in the war. I think if you listen to President Biden, earlier in his presidency, he seemed almost disinterested in things that were happening. He has a passion for this war. And you listen to the speech that you just played. This is not a guy who is just playing games. He is very genuine about it. And he's hoping to hold together this NATO coalition, which, you know, these guys over in Europe, they're very nervous about what's going on, but they're all afraid to stand up to the United States. I really worry that it is genuine, that it's not some sort of a stage presentation, but it's something that is genuine, that has gotten beyond what any one person is likely to control. We seem to be headed, you know, I'd like to tell you that wars are totally rational, but you can go back. I think a good example is what happened with World War I. Historians still debate over who was to blame, how the war started, but it started with the assassination of the Austrian Archduke and his wife. And in the end, 14 million people were dead at the end of First World War, and the stage was set for the Second World War that killed another 50 million. This started with 2 people. And I think here we're taking steps of phenomenal recklessness. I'll just give you an example. The United States was involved in sinking the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, the Moskva. It's named after the capital of Russia. 300 young sailors went to the bottom. We probably fired the missiles. We probably controlled them ourselves. We targeted 13 senior Russian field generals for assassination, helped to kill them along working with the Ukrainians. We went beyond, and from what I can tell, there was a drone attack that was launched that went deep into Russia and actually damaged some of their nuclear carrying jet aircraft, some of their nuclear powered or capable bombers. So this was part of their defensive triad. We have various people. We have the chairman of the House Foreign Relations Committee, who recently agreed with a crazy general who made the comment that we're going to be at war with China by 2025. Now, this is the chairman of the House Foreign Relations Committee. This isn't just some off-the-wall character. And yet he's saying, well, you know, there's some merit to what this general said. We seem to be determined to drive our car at 100 miles an hour into a bridge abutment. We're just aiming for it, and we got our pedal to the metal. It's a bizarre time. I've never experienced it. I've followed foreign affairs for about 70 years. Since I was a little boy, I had a fascination with it, and I've never seen us in a situation like that. The strategy behind that is, it is absolute madness. If you wanted to take down these 2 big nuclear powers, you would do them one at a time. We, for whatever reason, we've got the ball rolling. We've decided to take them both down simultaneously, and it is a terrible strategy. For a lot of reasons, but militarily, just purely militarily, it's a bizarre strategy. But we're in a time when rational people are not controlling events. Right. You know, I've always said that unlike some countries, you take Russia, President Putin is kind of the ultimate authority. He, you know, obviously everybody has input, but ultimately he makes the decision. In the United States, and particularly with NATO involved too, there is no central organizing intellect behind foreign policy, behind Western foreign policy. It is sort of an amorphous, moving blob that's constantly shifting. And you would like to think that there's somebody who can simply turn off the switch and say, okay, we're shutting this monster down. But it's not clear that there is. The United States would be devastated to the point where perhaps 60% of the population would die within the period of a month. Western Europe would be very similar. London would simply be uninhabitable for the next 1,000 years. Same thing with New York City, with Washington, D.C. There would be places that would be spared. Africa would be spared. There would be perhaps areas of Asia, perhaps Latin America. But Western civilization would die in a nuclear war. And I don't know that it matters to some of the people making the decisions today. It's a little bit eerie to watch it taking place. Somehow people have to wake up to it, or they may discover that we lose everything.